excerpt that he was going to read should be somewhat familiar to us. Ryan, do you wish to say anything tonight?
I guess I didn't really have anything planned, but
You don't have to, but
I told Jim kind of quietly, I'm hoping the camera's messed up and your sweatshirt's orange. I don't think I've ever seen you in OSU garb.
I would hope for green.
Standardized bylaws or some sort of kind of policies and procedures for how the advisory committees will function. It won't change much for our committee. We already do much of those things that are already in our version of the bylaws, so we will be forced, but we will adopt the new uniform bylaws. And there were talks around having us all reapply just as a formality. We all have the opportunity to continue sitting on this committee, but the specifics of the final document, I believe, are to be discussed at their January meeting. So they did a first reading at the December meeting. If you haven't taken a look at that, there was a copy of the document that I'm mentioning in their meeting packet. But in January here at the end of the month, they'll be discussing that, I think, a second reading, potentially a vote. So, but other than that, continued discussion around some different projects, some of them pickleball related. There was some brief mention around opportunities for potentially land acquisition or trading or collaborating on some projects that might bring about additional trails. But there was some comments from a few board members about there being a Bob and Crystal Riley Park Advisory Committee that would likely, within their charge, handle the trails up there. So that, again, has also not been formalized through any type of vote, but that is something that was discussed and will likely be brought up in their January CPRD board meeting. And you said Jim is there. I don't know if he has anything else to add that might be relevant to the group, but.
Nope.
Perfect. All right. Next, committee member updates, comments. Does anybody have anything?
I wanted to say that I really love the bark that was put on the trail, the golf course trail over the gravel.
Yep.
It's fantastically amazing. I've been enjoying it. I just want to say
And
that.
Shad Park, it's much better.
Oh, I haven't been up there.
Yep.
Just drove by. So the bark application has been very well appreciated.
Awesome. Go ahead, Matt.
I just had a couple items that have come to me either through Oregon Equestrian Trails or Oregon Trail Coalition or the SDC, Special District SDA. AO, thank you. One of those is that Oregon Government Ethics Commission is holding a public meeting training on February 1st. It's a webinar. Given that that's been an issue with the board, I'd recommend at least maybe one or two of us try to attend that so that we're up to speed, so we're making sure that we're doing everything we need to do as far as public meetings go.
Can you say that one more time, what that was?
Yes, and I'll hand this to you so you can get it in a minute.
Okay, that's great.
Oregon Ethics Commission, public meeting training.
Yeah, they have seminars that come up several times a year. And if anyone wants to take them, we can sign up for that.
Yeah, SDAO also has public meeting materials that you can take on your own time at any time you'd like. The second is Oregon Parks and Recreation District has just opened up a number of grants. It amounts to about $30 million in total. And that's their local government grant program. They've got a workshop coming up on February 6th in the morning. I don't know if CPRD, I'm sure you guys are probably aware of it, but I don't know if you guys are attending it. Would it be helpful to have someone from our committee?
If someone would like to volunteer and be there, yeah, that'd be great.
I think that's the same grant that CPRD used back in 2018 to get almost $300,000 for the Friends Park, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and we do have currently a grant for the Sandwich State.
Okay,
Not
great.
that much, but
Great. Do you have anything else to add, like as far as what maybe CPRD might want to pursue with those grants? Or-
I haven't really had time to look at it.
Okay.
I've been working with John Champlin on.
Hey Casey, can you turn your mic on?
I've been working with John trying to finalize the master plan for the Bob and Crystal Riley Park. Trying to get a fire plan together for 12 Valley Fire and Rescue and do all that kind of stuff. It should come out to we had a task force to review that, and they'll be getting that soon, and then it'll go to the board this month for their approval.
Okay.
And basically, all that happened was they took the bikes out. So it's pedestrian, equestrian only.
And they took the bikes out at direction of the board?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't really want to stop the master plan process because we do still have documents that show everything. So if any changes happen to come along, we still have those documents.
Sure.
And we're doing things kind of the way the board wants to.
Okay.
I can highlight a little bit on the local government grants. I'm on the committee for the state. There's 14 of us throughout the state that reviews and approves the grants. So last year, our total amount of money was $10 million. Due to some legislative moves and so on, now this next year, it will be $30 million for the state of Oregon. And the way it's broken down is that you have the grants that go to our committee are $1 million or less per application. Then the OPRD staff can make decisions on grants that are up to $100,000. And then there's also a $50,000 planning grants that you can also get. So that's kind of how that works. And my assumption is that if it's the same first part of April, they'll be due from the agencies.
Yeah.
Then we review them in June. And then it goes through this, the Department of Rec reviews that, and then they make decisions. So that's kind of how it works. So hopefully, I'll encourage CPRD to jump on it. But they got a lot on their plate too.
Sure.
And usually there's a 10% match on that.
It's usually more than that.
Well, 10%, it depends if you're a county, district,
Yeah.
or a city. So it just
Sometimes it's up to 50%. Some of them are 30. I think Friends Park was 30
yeah.
or 40.
You can go to the OPRD website and look under local government grants, and they'll tell you all about it. It's a really good program for the state of Oregon.
The federal grants are, like the one we have for the bypass trail, that's only, I think it's 10% or 20%.
Okay.
They vary, so you just kind of, different grants vary
Sure.
what the percentage match is.
There's one, sorry. I was going to add one other grant if there wasn't anything else to add.
I was just going to mention that I just looked it up, and it's depending on the population of the district. So up to 25,000, I guess, residents would be 40% match. Otherwise, about that 50%.
And then the other program that came to my attention was the National Park Service has a conservation outdoor recreation technical assistance program that's now open, and that is help with planning of projects for the most part, or just any other expertise. So there's no money involved, but they do put some people power and legwork and apply that to the district. So I thought those would be helpful for us to know with some trail projects kind of in the works or upcoming. I'll pass that down.
Anyone else?
And I noticed Quentin was at the end of his survey. He put in the Oregon Trails liability issue that's coming up in Oregon about liability for injuries on maintained trails. That's, there are several opportunities to write letters to support public trails in Oregon. And that's gonna be that all happened with a situation over in Seaside or Newport, and a lady fell going across the bridge to a beach, and they didn't consider that recreation. They considered it, what is it, transportation. So it's all interpretation, and I feel bad because you want to close the trails down, but yet, for the most part, people won't say anything. It's kind of up to them. It's kind of use at your own risk type thing. I would hate to see what happens at the golf course if they ever took that away, because technically it's whoever hits the golf ball, that's their responsibility. If they can get out of that somehow, then that might become an issue in the future as well.
The legislature's taking a look at that. But what you folks said is if this group can get some letters to your legislators about it, and it's not just your public trails, it's also the folks that have
Anyone who has
private
trails.
trails, then let the public go on them. I can see them just saying, nope. So I think it's a big deal for the state of Oregon, and we need the public to speak out, that, hey, we want folks to be able to use this and be immune to liability, because of, it's just a real shame.
Yeah, I mean, we will write a letter and in support of that, but I think the more people you get involved with that, the more it becomes an issue.
Yeah. Well, since it was brought up, there's a second to last item on there, Aaron. The Oregon Trail Coalition has a webinar, a lunch and learn coming out specifically for recreational immunity, and I don't remember the date off the top of my head.
It is January 30th from noon to 1.
Lunch hour.
And also, I believe that Oregon's one of the only states, or maybe the only state, that has this issue.
Challenge.
This has been taken care of in almost every other state, so it's unfortunate.
Anyone else?
Loved your survey, Quinn. Good
I
job.
apologize for the length of the packet. There was a 2-page executive summary, so I was capable of boiling it down to 2 pages, or 1.5 for getting technical. I know that I usually go long, but yeah, this is the first draft, and since there's no other comments, my comment was just going to be that I apologize for the delay, but it was quite a bit of a hassle to figure out how exactly to examine all of this data, because I pulled all of it out into an Excel spreadsheet and was going to go from there, and then I realized that was a very painstaking process. So I figured out using the integrated data analysis tools within the survey platform is actually easier. So moving on to 7. Yes. Agenda item number 7. The trail survey. So Matt and I spoke, and I just want to show my appreciation for Matt. Came in and helped me out with some of the analysis of the free response, the qualitative data. I think for us, most surveys or most research comes with a recommendation section. You'll see that is called out but blank. That's where I want our committee over the next month to be able to kind of mull over some of the results, ask further questions, and then from there, Matt and I have already talked about some potential directions that we might instinctively want to recommend some items. For example, there is a lot of data in here that suggests that our older population in the district had a higher proportion of concerns about accessibility of trails compared to other groups. So thinking about accessibility, and I already know in our conversations with some of the reports to the board is that Casey and Brian have been working. I think y'all said you repaved the Jacob Park trails. Is that right, Casey?
Yeah.
Yeah. So some of the comments that were in here, of course, being from September, October, it's important that we can kind of pull those out and still recognize that they were statistically relevant here, but they might have already been taken care of from a management perspective. And then some of the others, obviously, the desire for equestrian and cycling trails in the district and seeing how those shake out as far as kind of just looking at our population. If you kind of extrapolate some of the survey results, there's some unique findings there, and then some of the folks voicing their opinions about how to move forward or how do we address some of the management changes that occurred at Bob and Christopher Riley Park. So hopefully folks had an opportunity at least to read the executive summary, if not skim through the findings. The key findings section is where you're going to find all the written out, kind of pulled out the key points. Otherwise, there were several pages of graphs, which is that raw data. So there is an opportunity if we have specific subsets or segments that we want, segments of data that we want to pull out. For example, if we want to break out specific demographics, or what data or what responses are there to question B, given somebody answers something specific in question A. If folks have those, we can write them down and record those, and then I can start pulling that data outside of a meeting and distribute that to the group via email. Obviously, as you have upwards of 40 questions, 50 questions, you can't segment every question from every other question, otherwise you have an exponential problem. But I guess just for us, an opportunity to kind of discuss what was in the packet, any questions that you have that I can try to answer off the cuff with the data in front of me, and then as we take time over the break between our this meeting this month and the one in February, discussing via email. Folks want to join in a work session to kind of just discuss some potential recommendations or answering any questions. Then at our February meeting, coming with a list of recommendations to include with the entire survey, vote on that and include it with the survey and present the survey to the CPRD Board of Directors in their February meeting. And talking with Matt, it might be wise opportunity and a cool opportunity for other committee members to be involved in that presentation rather than just myself, it being separate from our committee report. So, and I'll turn over to you, Matt, if you have anything else that you'd want to add from our kind of discussion of how this might go.
Yeah, I think the main thing that Quinn and I talked about was that, first of all, thanks to Quinn for pulling all of this stuff together. You can tell that he's got a real talent for it. My concern is that the board may not have the time or the inclination to read through the entire report. And so I think it's part of our job to synthesize things down to a simple message that we can deliver and say, this is what we're hearing from the community. This, from our perspective as a committee, this is what we saw in that data. Here's what we would recommend, and make it a very short and clear presentation in addition to the report. So the report's really just there to back that up, and the report's for us to draw those understandings from. But I think it would be very important for us to just synthesize it and present it to the board so that they can understand it within a very short presentation rather than counting on them to read through it.
I will be quizzing Casey, though. He will have a written and oral exam. I'm kidding.
I'm sure I memorized all 100 pages of that.
Yeah, no, 100%, Matt. And I think even beyond the board of directors, obviously the public, in sharing this and being completely transparent, again, the report is really the scientific component behind it. The section labeled discussion really gets into, did we answer our research questions? What are future research questions based off of the data's story and the gaps in data, that any potential mistakes or errors, survey errors, and there are a few minor ones that are discussed in there. And ultimately, I think what's really cool is we were able to pull off a statistically significant survey with 12.8% of our sample responding. So between 10 and 30%, depending on how what confidence level you utilize, means that you can extrapolate the results generally to the entire population. So we can kind of do that in this scenario. Some of the errors, they can easily be mitigated, and when we are looking at specific questions that pertain to those errors, you can add a preface or a stipulation to those. But overall, I think it is really cool that we were able to pull out quite a bit of engagement from our community and answering approximately a 15-minute survey. And I meant to pull out the average time that it actually took people to complete it, but overall, I think there's a lot of good data in here, and we have a responsibility to be very transparent with that. So that's where the report comes in, but also the communication aspect of what are the key points and what do people really need to take away from this, the board and the public. So, making potentially a recorded version that's available on the internet of just us reading through, or not reading, but kind of storytelling through the key findings section, making one-pagers that are maybe more visual, and making sure that those are distributed to the public as well, just to make sure that we are effectively communicating the actual results, so we don't expect people to read through a college level research paper, or a professional firm research paper. So I think that's where I can do a lot of that with some of the help from you all around what are we most interested in folks knowing and the board knowing, and then I can pull together those data points and put them into a format that's successful for whatever purpose that we want. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how really to go about this conversation, Matt, in the meeting, but I mean, I think if anybody has any questions or anything they noticed, I think just an open discussion for a good portion of this meeting would be beneficial, and then working through some of the specifics via email. But
Yeah, we want to go around the table and people just kind of give an impression or a question or comments. Who wants to start?
You had mentioned that this is Marty here, that you'd have a list of recommendations you were saying that you would present to the board. Is that what you said at the beginning? Like next?
Yeah, from the committee standpoint, it would be included with the report, the survey report. So generally, when you have a survey that would likely influence or aid those in decision making, you might add a recommendation section that kind of takes the data and translates it into kind of a useful application in the current scenarios that we're dealing with. So as opposed to me, looking at the scientific aspect of the survey, it would be beneficial for the committee to come up and vote on potential recommendations to include in the survey. Mainly, I think in some ways different from how we've normally done recommendations, in that they're very specific in the nature of, we think you should be doing this on this time frame, and we'll support this. In some cases, we might separate out specific recommendations that go to that level of detail and engagement from our committee. But I think generally, what I'm looking for is, we saw a lot of data that supports that there aren't enough accessible trails for folks 65 and older. We recommend, based off of this data, that park staff further research and potentially look into a certain criteria or percentage of ADA accessible trails in the district, right? Kind of just on a broad scale of, the park district should think about heading in this direction because the data says this. And I don't know if, Matt, you could probably clarify that better than I can.
Yeah, that's a good example. That's the kind of example I was looking for. And,
If we can highlight, the top 5 or so concerns or big takeaways from the information, and then 5 or so recommendations that would move those 5 things forward or address those concerns, then I think that would be beneficial. Then the board doesn't have to brainstorm it on their own. That's kind of why they put together this committee, is so we could look at the information and come up with those recommendations.
And I think boiling it down to a set number like 5, is a good way to make sure that we don't get excited about making recommendations and finding key points, because then they just become points.
You look through comments, what do you think?
I think it's perfect, 5, and then I agree with what you said.
I agree. No, after reading
Sounds like we have
all
a
this,
busy
this is
month
great.
ahead.
This is great.
Did anything stick out at you looking through the executive summary or kind of scanning through comments or graphs? Anything surprise you? Anything that was like, oh wow, or anything popped out?
I mean, community engagement always, like, people don't know where the trails are, I thought that was always very interesting, so that's definitely
Communication.
one of the big ones.
Yeah, communication with their.
Yep, that's big.
But overall, how positive trails are to the people who actually did this survey speaks volumes. Yeah.
Can we say we would like to have more trails? I mean, is that a recommendation?
That's a good recommendation.
Isn't that
I
your
think the
job, Marty?
survey,
I mean,
it seemed like the survey results said that people would like more trails. That's was one of the.
When we do present, do we have to pay attention to the Yamulus west side?
No, don't mention.
No, I don't mean that. I don't mean that, but make sure that we point out that would
It's different.
make some points that they can't argue against it. This is what our community wants,
Right.
and not make it political, right?
We can try.
No, yeah, but
And I think that's where the survey recommendations would leave out specific examples like mentioning the Amhelis West Side Trail.
yes.
And then if we as a committee wanted to go further, for example, one of the main ones that I recommend as we have further conversation is it's pretty clear through a lot of the qualitative feedback, and if you pull out some segmented data that I just didn't include in the survey, but a lot of folks, especially cyclists, their needs are not being met, and they've given some feedback around what has worked, what hasn't, and what will work through their perception. So we might decide to, for example, make a separate recommendation and vote on it from the ones included in the survey to the CPRD board explore putting cycling paths at the landfill site and look at acquiring that. That could be like an example of a more specific recommendation that we would do separately from just making broader recommendations in the survey.
And I never meant to say those words, the words that must not be spoken. I just know that the participation in a particular board meeting might bring those people that would immediately stand up and,
I think if you emphasize within our district, I think that's what we need to do.
yeah,
It's trails within our district.
yes.
should the Newburgh-Dundee bypass trail be mentioned as part of this recommendation, or are we?
That's within our district.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but as far as, is that something that, I mean, there was some comments about connecting Newburgh-Dundee that people
Yeah.
wanted as part of
That's
the.
a multi-use pathway. It's
Yeah.
connected from Providence all the way to Dundee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got some hurdles, but yeah.
I think there are several data points, and the qualitative data that Matt went through certainly speaks to, the community connectiveness, the utilizing it for, I won't use the word transportation, but getting from point A to point B safely, and just the opportunity to have varied experiences. That would, mentioning the Newburgh-Dundee bypass trail would be a great example of how you could achieve that, or how the park district could achieve that, which they're already pursuing, right? So further evidence or further support to kind of back it up.
Is the Newburgh-Dundee, was that trail supposed to be, was it going to be paved?
Yes.
Okay. That's unique as well for accessibility.
Would it have to be ADA
It is
compliant?
It is ADA compliant. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just, it's been a little while since we talked about it. There's still more funding needed for the other phases, right?
Oh,
We only
yes.
have phase 1, so we need phase 2. So do we have support based on this feedback to
Community
promote?
engagement is what we need to do. That's kind of pushing on that.
Yeah,
And,
and
you know, we asked some interesting, I guess some folks would call them interesting, I just call them questions, about like willingness to pay. How would you be, you know, how likely would you be to support like a temporary tax levy or the district using SDC, their tax revenue? And I don't know if we necessarily want to utilize that, especially at this point. But certainly something that might be beneficial to the board and park staff around when looking at these projects. How might we garner additional support? They're I think the highest category, the highest funding source that people were perceived to support, I'm pretty sure was state and federal grants.
Yeah.
And then after that was donations. And then I think general tax revenue was also like third. So those are obviously the ones that are likely easiest, most socially acceptable for the district to pursue. So again, kind of confirming the current status quo, but the ability to reach out to the folks who shared their email address with us. We have a larger audience that we can tap into for support, whether it be advocacy, locally or at a different level, whether it be through a grant and writing letters of support or other means like that. So something to consider there too. Anything else?
there were a couple, I read through a couple hundred comments a number of times to try to categorize them, and by no means was I perfect at it, but a couple themes started to emerge as I started to look at things. One of those was lack of awareness about trails. There were a lot of comments that said, I didn't even know we had trails. Boy, I wish I knew about these trails you're talking about. First time I've heard of it. So that awareness and communication, I think that's what we're hearing from the community, is a lack of awareness. I think the solution to that is that CPRD would look at being more proactive about broadcasting information about trails so that people are proactively, it's getting pushed to them rather than them having to wait. And the idea of trails comes to their mind and they just magically end up on the CPRD website to find information. And there were even comments to that effect, like, yeah, I've gone to the website, it was kind of hard to find it, and I wish you guys would be a little more proactive about that. Yeah, Jim.
On that topic, does this, does this committee look, we used to have brochures that went out to everyone in our district.
Mm-hmm.
We don't anymore because, in the internet world. Do you think bringing that back would be a plus, to have a brochure mailed? Not. Maybe
Something
for-
I would say is that that was when he came,
sorry?
Jason Fields, when he came to our, he is one of our members, and when he came, that was he really wanted some flyers to go out. So I really think, if we could promote trails on flyers, I think that would be, you can see that there's a lot of people who are craving that kind of information and don't know how to find it other ways, and especially for older people trying to navigate a somewhat difficult website to find the information they're looking for. And, the GPS coordinates, all these things, I think they would like to have. I think that's something absolutely worth exploring, and I think I heard some maybe levels of support from the board on that.
So you feel our website that we have now is difficult to
For trails, I
purchase,
do.
to go through?
I think so.
There's so much on it because you guys do so much.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it's-
I've done some web development in a past life, and what tends to happen with websites is there's an initial kind of idea, and then over time, things get glommed onto it, which makes it harder to navigate. And you can kind of see that with some of the navigation. At least I see evidence of that through my eyes, of things have been glommed on over time, and there's probably someone needs to take a bigger look at that website. But I think it goes beyond the website. I think publishing actual tangible things and pushing them out to the community would be helpful. Not only information about trails, but just general information about the parks and the facilities. This is how much tax money there's questions about, how much money does CPRD have, right? Or concerns about that. This is your dollar. This is where it goes to. This is how we're spending it. So, it broadens out beyond trails, but for our purposes with the survey, yeah, we need to have some printed materials.
Thanks for your input.
Yeah, and there's something about having a physical map. I know when I lived in Portland, the area that I was in, they had the trails, but then they had the safe walking routes between the trails, and then you could pinpoint where you were, like where you lived, and then where the closest safe walking route was then to the trail, and that really connected them, and that was really valuable to me, and I really like the physical map. And I think I agree that a lot of folks don't know about the trails, on a separate point, but also a lot of folks that do know about trails is probably because they live by one. And so if you're in an area of Newburgh or the area that where there's not a trail around you, that's probably why you don't know about it. And so I think it's also a good reason to have more trails around, so everybody can enjoy them, not just the folks that live by them.
Yeah, so one of the themes is communication, information, and just general awareness. I think we've got some ideas for that. We just need to come up with a paragraph that says this is what we've seen in the data. Here's what the data says. Here's what the comments say about that. And here's some possible ideas to investigate. So broad, general stuff. And I think by going broad now, that lets us come to the board maybe in the future with a very specific idea. Like, okay, this quarter, we would like the board to look at, actually spending some money to get this information out or to gather this information, direct staff to gather it, that kind of thing.
And I think there's some qualitative comments that can serve as examples or can be injected within those. One that I found I really appreciated was somebody mentioned utilizing or at least looking into best practices or other examples, case studies, and sharing those with the public, with the board, mentioning those in our meeting, letting those kind of steer decisions. So, prime example is as we're discussing the mailers, like I know in Ben Park and Rec, they do it every quarter. They have a playbook, which mentions a lot of their recreation services, and they have some listings of like their parks and other opportunities. But, I think for us, including case studies or other examples, even in our recommendations, would be good too.
The other big concern theme that I saw was maintenance of existing facilities and trails. A lot of the comments from folks that some of them were actually an argument to be against trails, I think there's definitely a camp that's using maintenance as an excuse to not have trails. But more broadly, I think there's a concern that as we add new trails, that maintenance is not neglected. And so that's the common concern, I think, is that we as a community don't want our trails to get in the way of maintaining our existing facilities and parks and trails. So how do we address that with the community? Is that through information? Is that through the board making a overall policy decision where they say, this percentage of our budget is for maintenance, this percentage of our budget is going to be for new trails? That probably do that in the budgeting process.
Well, yes, because the maintenance comes out of the general fund and the development comes out of the SDCs.
Yeah, so there's already kind of a splitting of those
dividing
funds.
line there,
I think educating the community a little bit about that, where those funds are, where they come from, where they can be used. I wasn't aware until just a few months ago, okay, SDCs can't be used in the general fund. They have to be used
Right.
for new capital projects.
Increased usage,
Yeah.
basically.
So I would imagine most of the community doesn't even know the difference between an SDC and a tax.
No, it all looks like a tax.
Yeah. So I think that's where, that may be part of that recommendation, is to say, well, this is how many hours we do spend on maintenance. This is what we do maintain. These are the levels of maintenance that we have for each of our parks. I know that, Jim, in one of your planning sessions with the board, I think you talked about the levels of maintenance or the setting a certain standard for different parks. You know, not everything's going to look like the golf course. Not everything's going to look like, you know, there's different user groups.
Well, everything can look like,
But that may
you know, the
increase
Taj Mahal,
funds.
but it also costs
Lots of money.
lots of money. So a question, not to interrupt, but a question for you folks, and be truthful please, is do you feel that our maintenance is not up to par for our facilities in this district? We have a lot of facilities.
Yeah, I was gonna say which ones.
I don't think that's right.
Yeah.
I mean,
There again, it's different levels, right?
yeah, and I would say over time I've used different ones. I have lived in different parts of the city, and so, or had kids in different sports at different fields, or, you know, so it's old knowledge I have, it's newer knowledge. I don't consistently go throughout, and you guys are managing a lot. The golf course path is really well maintained, I would say. I don't have any issues with that. Anytime, I almost feel like people also, they're having these ideas of maintenance problems, but I feel like they just need like a really clear way to report it and a response to it. And like to have to go to the CPRD website or something and find some place to report something. If it really bothers you, maybe, but it's almost like at every facility there should be a email address or a QR code or something where you can report something that's
We
you're
do
having
have a
problem
system.
with.
It's
You
a
do, I've
phone
called.
call, yeah.
I've called.
A phone number.
On the Gibbon
2909.
Loop, there was someone camping back there, so I called, and they took care of it. and
How
did
did you find the phone number? Is it on the signs?
Call the
in-
registration desk.
Okay, so you
They
looked
can
up
forward it.
CPRD's
Yeah.
phone number.
Yeah.
That again takes a little bit of effort. I almost
Does.
wish there was like
That's
any
that age
issues.
thing again.
Yeah.
You know, you go grocery shopping, older people are disadvantaged because they don't get coupons in the mail anymore. It all goes on their phone. If they don't have a phone, it's the same thing. Technology's changed. City uses ClickFix for issues in the city, and that's an app that yeah, it's something that we could possibly look at. But we don't want to be, we want to be proactive, not reactive. And, you know, we have people that walk the trails at least once a week. I know I used to walk every trail in the district once a week while I was out. I visit all the properties. And it's just, you can't get everything.
No, there's not. You know, that's the thing. Like
There's 1,200 acres.
the
that we're looking
bathroom
at.
is an issue at Jaquith. I know that always has arisen over time,
We've
or
had
this or
homeless
that.
problems.
Yeah.
We've had all
Yeah.
kinds of stuff that's new. Some, you know, we're checking on bathrooms sometimes 3 times a day. And ask Kim, that was never the case before. It was once, maybe 5 times a week, and on and go forward. Now it's 7 times a week and sometimes as many as 3 times a day.
And then there's always the general public too, that are important to us.
Yeah.
To volunteer to help in some of these areas. You know, the way the society's changed, you can't cover all these issues and problems. So that's where, or even on maintenance of trails statewide, you have volunteers that help, or volunteers that can report.
So I think in a general opinion, I think that everything is, I feel like things are well maintained, but there's a constant degradation push that, I mean, so I don't know, it's hard. It's hard to say, and things are aging, you don't have the money to replace them and make them shiny brand new every single minute. Like some of the facilities that I think are so well maintained have aged 15 years since I saw them last, so I'm not sure, but.
When you say degradation push, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, you know, people camping on trails or people trying, I mean, overall in society, we're having these issues everywhere. It's not just Newburgh, of course, or Dundee, but, you know, Portland parks, any of the parks in any of the districts are facing these kinds of issues. I don't think it's unique here at all. I hate to bring in the P word, but tigered. Just say talk about tigered, or I don't know.
And I think that's where, you asked that question, Jim, and I feel like my perception is a little altered. I'd argue not because I haven't been there on trails as much. I mean, I walked every mile of trails in the district last spring and fall, but living in Bend, there's a different perception of the value of collecting taxes, and there's a larger tax revenue base. So in Bend, you have crushed gravel, compacted trails that a lot of them are probably ADA accessible in some of the major inner city parks, and some of them are paved probably in some of the neighborhood parks. And then you've got some that are rugged in like a nature preserve, and they have departments who are like natural resources management, and they have folks who have dedicated positions. And I only say that because, having worked for CPRD also, I mean, there's no dedicated trail crew. When I worked on the landscaping crew with Brian, we would occasionally do some, probably some of the instances of somebody complained or pointed something out, and, Brian said, today we're going to go out to this trail and we're going to regrade this portion that was wiped out, and, Russ does a lot of work, obviously, and so it's also the perception specific to our community, and we can't really understand what are they comparing it to. You go to a wilderness area, it's people are going to look at our trails and say, holy crap, these are nice. But a sidewalk in comparison, a nice flat sidewalk that was just done yesterday, is going to look a lot better in a lot of instances. So I think that's where in some cases, like a focus group that we had mentioned at an earlier meeting as a recommendation of, you get these large scale results, and we can't really dive into those. We can't ask follow-up questions real time, right? But if we have folks, and that's kind of what Jim's doing right now with us, is, poke at what are the follow-up questions we want to know. And, for example, I'm just thinking, if we did have a focus group of a pretty diverse group of folks, or a smaller sample that we sent a survey to, you could show them pictures of different qualities of trail maintenance, or even just examples of our parks, and you could ask them to point out, what do you like? What here is positive, or what's negative? Which one of these 5 examples of different levels of trail maintenance do you aspire to have in our district? And then from there, on the back end, we can know, or, in a lot of cases, Casey will know, the paved path costs, $1,500 a yard versus, a dirt path that some volunteers make costs close to nothing, right? So I think you asking these very important questions that, I think deserve some additional thought and some additional questioning, and I don't know how we go about that or how the park district wants to go about asking some of those follow-up questions. But I think generally it's a challenge because you do have different parks at different levels, and there's definitely a benefit, the district hasn't already done it, of setting some type of standard and assessment method of saying, Jakewood Park, we want that to be ADA accessible because the survey says a lot of the 65 and older population uses that park specifically, and they've complained about it, and they just repave, right? So versus Shad Park has some pretty high grades, where it's definitely not accessible to most audiences who are physically challenged. So putting bark chips there and making it more of a ableist, someone who's more able can utilize that park to a higher difficulty. You're creating different experiences too, right? So there's a perception of the maintenance level that creates those two experiences. So my rambling on to say, I think this is a great question, and it's an example of follow-up questions that I think our committee and the staff and board might be interested in asking some group of the public to kind of narrow down how does that become a policy, or how do we address whatever they're saying. And in some instances, like Jakewood Park, maybe it's already been addressed, right? So I'll get off my soapbox.
I think the maintenance is fine. I think when I look around different parks, I don't have a problem with the maintenance. I mean, there's things that stick out in my mind where there's been instances of a problem, but then it was fixed. And so maybe some of the people who are responding are thinking about just kind of the negative, because that sticks out in your mind. But I think there's also kind of a political element. I mean, I think maintenance is commonly a reason why people are opposed to things because of the cost of long-term maintenance. And so I think maybe some of the respondees are, putting it for that reason. And I think what Matt was saying earlier, to talk about, what it actually costs to maintain these trails might be a good counter to that. Because my understanding is it's not terribly expensive to maintain a trail. Maybe I'm
Casey,
wrong.
do you guys have a deferred maintenance plan on trails?
We pretty much went through all the trails this year, except for all the asphalt type stuff, and that's gonna be addressed in the next couple years. There's Billick Park, there's, Crater, there's, Friends Park was just done. Those are all ADA accessible parks. Well, I'm not sure about Billick's somewhat. Probably not completely ADA, but
Not the restrooms, but most of the trail.
most of the trail. So those are specific areas that you could say were ADA trails. But they are in, it's a communication thing. Where do people get the information to go and find those? We have meetings with Roy Gatherall. He's on the city ADA committee, and
Sidewalk,
I
yeah.
try and identify areas of Newburgh that have limited ADA access, and they've been working on that for several years. And we always get caught. Cultural Center, we're having to redo some curb ramps and everything, even though they've been done a couple times already.
The standards change.
Because the
every 5 years.
standards change. So you get caught in situations where no matter what you do, you end up spending more money than you want to do.
But you do have some level of like a schedule of you need to replace park chips every year, every
You need
2
to
years,
add,
or
from what we figured out, it's about 1/7 of what's there every year. So they degrade, a foot goes down, in 7 years it'll be nothing. So you can take some out if you need to, or if you add certain amount of material every year, it just maintains. But it
but
degrades.
those costs and time are built into your annual budget.
Yeah, they are.
Well,
I mean,
to answer Jim's question, I've not seen any glaring deficiencies with maintenance of trails. I've seen little things here and there just because I've got critical trail eyes, maybe more than the average person. But again, it matters less what I as an individual citizen necessarily think about the level of trails, and more what have we as a community agreed that the standards are for this trail, that trail, and on down the line. So what matters, I think, from that perspective, is that there is a clear system to have the reactive maintenance where people can report it, and people can maybe even keep a closer eye on that so that they know, the work orders on trails or parks in general are climbing, or they're staying at a certain level. Well, why is that? Most likely it's because our level of staff hasn't kept up with the growth of our parks. And so looking at your work orders and making that public knowledge may help, so we can have a more open community dialogue about, well, what's the problem here? It's easy to say CPRD isn't taking care of XYZ park. It's harder to say, well, why is that? Is there a deeper reason? Typically that comes back to resources and where our priorities for resources. So, I think goes back to the first issue of just information, making the public aware of it, and then knowing what your plans are, like what making those things public. What are you doing to be proactive about maintenance? Giving us as citizens some information to go, okay, they've got at least a plan. It may not be at my personal level, but CPRD has a plan and they're working through it, and it looks like they're doing a reasonable job within the budget constraints. I think that's important for CPRD to communicate that. So that's what I have for maintenance. I had two other big issues that showed up. There's actually a third one, but I think it fits into these two. The third one that I'm not going to include is homelessness. And I think it applies to people being concerned about personal safety and then also the impact on property owners. And so depending on whether you own a home next to a trail or whether you use a trail, you probably fall into one of those camps when it comes to homelessness. But I think safety, user safety is a big one that we need to address. Like, what is the plan? CPRD doesn't have a police force. They rely on the Newburgh-Dundee Police Department to do that. And then the few maintenance people that may be around at the parks to tell someone, hey, cut it out. Stop lighting a fire in the middle of the park. I mean, so unless we as a group of citizens want to give CPRD rangers with the authority to enforce those
We already have
laws.
safety officers.
Okay.
Why would we double up on that?
You have safety officers.
Well, they're police.
The police, right.
We
Right.
work with the police through materials that we have available, and we usually catch people doing things. It's just that they really don't do much to them,
Yeah.
and there's not really a lot of options for them. So it's a housing crisis more than homelessness.
Yeah. So, and again, I think our job as a committee is just to be the conduit for this information that's coming in from the community. So what we're hearing are awareness and additional communication are a concern, maintenance are a concern, safety is a concern, and then the impact on property owners are concerns. And then I think we need to do some creative work as a committee to come up with some recommendations to point the board in the right direction so they can start addressing those concerns. I don't know if anyone saw anything else besides those things they want to add or have questions, but those are the four that I saw.
I'll just add on to that real quick. Personal safety was one of on the quantitative side, was one of the main reasons why people didn't use trails and one of the main concerns of trails. And then those that do use trails, 21% encountered some problem or conflict. And then of those, 21% that experienced a conflict, 50% were self-reported as being an interaction with someone doing drugs or alcohol, inappropriate behavior, whether that be something of the criminal nature or just someone being a teenager, or unauthorized camping, threats to personal safety. So to Casey's point, that's obviously something that even a ranger wouldn't really address. That would be a public safety officer, coming in and addressing. And then you've got a pretty big jump down to 27% reported after that unauthorized camping. And I think it's important that there's a lot of use of the word homeless in here, and a lot in the pre-response questions. I think there's some, we obviously can't tell from the results, but there's probably some confusion or just folks not being able to know, are they truly a person who is by definition homeless? Or are they someone that they perceive because of visual indications that they believe that person's homeless, right? So there might be some perception issues here around, it could just be someone who's transient or someone that's going through the park and not behaving 100% or doesn't look 100% like the traditional, statistically traditional trail user, that there might not be a problem there really, or something that's easily taken care of by there being other people around to discourage the the origin of any additional negative behavior, right? And we've talked about that with Ewing Young Park and the other plot of land that we're trying to connect with the bridge, and that ultimately trails, if they're used, they discourage unauthorized camping, is what I'll say. And other, other activities that are against the rules, right? So I just want to make that distinction.
So Quinn, I also drew out in my analysis, there were 5 specific things that the community seemed like they wanted in the form of trails. I don't necessarily need to go through those now. Where do you want to go with this as far as moving this forward for next month?
Yeah, I mean, I'm putting all my faith in Aaron because I'm really bad at taking my own notes, but it seems like that there are roughly 5 key findings that we discussed that would lend themselves to some type of recommendation. So I think if we can pull those out and kind of simplify those for email discussion.
Brian, quiet.
And then come up with a list that maybe everyone through circulation of email has kind of looked at it and provided comments at our next meeting. Discuss. I mean, I think we've kind of discussed some that we might vote on at our next meeting, but if we take them to email for just additional discussion and then potentially vote on it at next meeting. I don't know, Matt, what your thoughts are, but.
Well, I'm hesitant to bring the conversation to email just because then we would be having a quorum and a public meeting over email without noticing the public. So I think our best bet is to break it into, have a committee of less than a quorum, start to work on drafting some things. Am I on track with that?
I'm trying to remember with the public meeting laws, because emails are weird too. That's why we copy cat and everything for public records requests. I wonder if we took turns.
No, then you have a serialized meeting.
Okay, so obviously you've attended one of these webinars.
I have. I actually have my certification from the Special District Association of Oregon in board leadership.
No, we're covered.
Lead us to the light.
So you're saying a smaller subset of the group?
Yeah, you can break it into committee.
Okay.
As long as they're not making any deliberation. That's my understanding. I'm not an attorney.
Okay.
That's my layman's understanding.
In that case,
So are there like 5 or less people who want to start on that? I can be out. I can hear it at the next meeting, so I'll pull myself out if.
It's very generous of you.
Does anyone want to volunteer?
I'll be in since I've probably looked at the comments more than anyone should.
I volunteered.
Awesome.
That's
we
Kim
have-
also.
Thank you,
Sorry.
Kim.
Kim, Matt,
I'm trying not to volunteer because I'm not sure if I'm going to be around next few months, but I want to.
And-
We'll be forgiving
and-
if you can't do any.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
If I bow out halfway.
Yeah.
And Alan's not here. I think he might be interested because he keeps asking me all these months that we haven't met, how's the survey going? So not to volunteer him, but I'm happy to sit out and just respond to inquiries for additional data. Obviously, Matt, we've talked pretty intensively about, and you've been there along the way to help me with the crafting of the survey. So
I know one breakout that we're going to want for sure, and I didn't see if you included it here at the end. Can you break out families with kids and their response rates separate from everyone else?
Yeah.
I'd like to see that. And then you had a senior group already broken out? So
in the report, what I did is anything that was hold on, let me put this in layman's terms, just because it's difficult for me to even wrap my head around. There's an analysis called crosstab analysis, to where you take a demographic or another data point, a classification, and you compare the results to a question with the responses from different classifications. So, for example, if I take the percentage of folks who knew about the master plan for the Chehalem Heritage Trails, and I take the subset of categories of age brackets, and then I say, okay, cross-tab those two variables, and it spits out a p-value that tells me, is there a statistical difference in the proportions? Is there a pattern to how specific categories respond to that question? So I only included statistically significant instances where there are differences in patterns. So when you see in the report, so there's one here, across all potential funding sources, blah, blah, blah. Respondents in the $100,000 or more in household income indicated a stronger likeness of supporting blank funding options. That was because there was a statistical value that told me that group of people, the 100,000 or more household income, responded differently than the other income brackets.
Okay.
So
Could you break it out so that we can see families with kids versus, let's say, 55 and older? I don't know what your age cutoff was.
yeah, I mean,
I'd just like to see if there's a difference in the graphs,
Yeah.
basically, between those two.
yeah. Okay.
And
Yeah, and then any specific questions, like if you want to pull out a specific question and look at different demographics and how they compare, or even like an earlier question, like I want to see all the people who responded that they utilize trails for recycling, and then I want to see their answers or their response proportions to a different question about maintenance and the perception of the maintenance level. We can do that as well. It doesn't have to just be the 5 or 6 demographic questions too.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Quentin. So I will contact.
I'll volunteer for the committee too. If I don't know if it puts us over if Alan wants to as well. I don't know.
Kim, Marty.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
I have 2 little vacations between now and then, so I'll help out if I can.
So you've got 3 confirmed?
Yes.
Or did Cindy confirm? or
Cindy's
I'm confirmed.
confirmed.
Okay.
Oh, Cindy's confirmed. Okay.
So
then
I
Alan
will.
would be
I'll
our
email to
alternate.
follow up, and I will offer Alan an opportunity to join us if he would like, and I will get an email to you guys by the end of the week.
Thank you.
And then again, so that would be looking at the data, asking me for any additional breakouts you want to do, crosstabs, I guess is the technical term. And then you'll come up with the 5 kind of key things, and then the 5 potential recommendations. And in that, I think Matt, you just mentioned like what they want to see. I guess we could pull that out as well.
And
so.
real quickly, just so we're all on the same page, what I think overall people want more trails, they want more longer trails, and they want more various amenities, whether that's signage, lighting, benches, things like that. So the first one's just more. Very specifically, there's a big trend in the qualitative data for bikes. Riley was an issue with a huge chunk of comments. And I think by bikes, it includes BMX, it includes mountain biking, it also includes active transportation, just getting, or safe transportation between schools and parks. So bikes is a big one, but it was a big one on the survey, both in the numbers and the comments. Ewing Young, expanding it, was another big comment. Newburgh Dundee, leaning toward Dundee improvements. People want Newburgh and Dundee to be connected by some sort of trail, whether that's a bypass, the river, both, and they want more trails available in Dundee. And then you mentioned accessibility. So those are the 5 big themes that I saw, and we can take a closer look at that as a group.
And I'll cautiously mention that again, so this was an anonymous survey in that publishing the data, that we're not going to be connecting people with responses, and neither are we in the analysis looking at names and other things like that. However, each response has several layers of authentication that include personal identifiable information. So we can use that aggregately to pull out if you want. I didn't do this in the report, but we could take out the Newburgh versus Dundee addresses or the zip codes if we wanted to.
Okay,
Just
so
so you know that as well.
So we can
Zip code,
geographically separate if we need to.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
That's about as far as I would want to go and keep it a confidential, private survey.
And us
Okay.
keeping it in the aggregate form allows us to do that. Just want to clarify that. All right. Well, if we're good with that, Matt, you'll follow up with the folks that have indicated, and Alan, and
Yep.
we'll have something back for our February meeting, hopefully.
Will do. Thank you.
And then this presentation-wise, Matt, you're the one that kind of sparked my interest in your idea around sharing the floor at the board meeting. Did you want to discuss how that might go about? How we're discussing that?
I think maybe this group might come up with some of those things, because that's really what we're doing, synthesizing things to come up with a brief summary. So we can talk about if we want to each take a turn to talk about one of those points, or how we want to go about that. So can we bring something back to you next month?
That's music to my ears. Okay, perfect. Anything else on the survey? We'll let that group go out and do that, but anything else?
Yeah, I've got one thing. I just want to make sure, and if you could explain this again, that this was a random survey, am I correct? And that no one specifically was earmarked in the survey, it was sent out to random addresses, so there wasn't any special interest group it was sent out to or anything like that, is that correct?
Correct. There's no inherent survey bias. It was the Secretary of, it says it in the report, but Secretary of State's voter registration rule for the Newburgh School District, which I know is ever so slightly different from CPRD. And then we took a random sample of 5,000 individuals from that, and that was strictly random. So it computer generated random. And then, and actually, I guess more specifically, I did it 10 times and then used a random number generator to choose which random sample we used. And then after we sent that listserv, that sample listserv of 5,000 individuals to our folks at Allegra and Data Oregon, I think is their name, they removed approximately 900 individuals because of they have records for mailing, and they know that some individuals whose names were on that list no longer live at that address, or they have a address that is now outside of the state. So we removed those individuals to ensure that it was strictly just those who we know from mail records and voter records are currently living at the address in which that we sent it to. But from there, or to get there, we used lots of randomness, if that makes sense. Hopefully that helps, Jim.
No, I just want to make sure it's clear out there that people who are listening understand that.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. Moving on to our next agenda item. This is you, Matt, the recreation immunity letter discussion.
Yeah, as Casey mentioned, there was a case in Newport, Oregon, where a woman was walking her dog, slipped and fell on a bridge, broke her leg. That went to court. And went through various appeal levels. Finally, the Supreme Court said we're not going to touch it, so it stands. And what it does is it weakens the protections that cities and districts have when it comes, and private citizens that are opening up trails and other recreation facilities. So basically, if you're using a facility and you can claim somehow that you're not using it for recreational purposes, transportation. I'm not actually using the park. I'm using the park to get from this side of the park to the other side of the park, where I'm going to travel on my way to the grocery store, for example. That opens up the district for additional liability. The Oregon Council of Cities, I don't know their official name, but most cities have the same insurance company. Their insurance company has been recommending that cities shut down their trails because it opens up liability for the insurance company. And so having learned about this through Oregon Equestrian Trails, through Oregon Trail Coalition, and just through the news, I came across a couple different letters that cities and districts are sending. I blatantly plagiarized Scapus's letter, and that's what you'll find in the packet. My recommendation is that we recommend that the CPRD board review that letter and then send it to a list of elected officials and community organizations so that we can get the word out about it and we can encourage our representatives to move forward legislation at the state level. to address this. So without the state addressing it, it kind of has left an extra hole in the law, and it just needs to be cleaned up by the legislature.
Do you know what page in the packet?
I bet I can find it.
Yeah, it was buried somewhere. I
It's
think.
buried toward the end
The last
somewhere.
few pages, oh, come on.
Last two? I thought I just looked at the last two pages. That's Appendix F, Appendix E? Appendix E.
Yeah.
Correct, you know.
I just had a
Page
question.
123.
Yeah, Kim has a
Can you hear
question.
me? Sorry.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, is it possible to put signage on there that you're at your own risk so that that protects the park and rec, at every trail, it's at your own risk.
I don't personally have an answer for that. I know that we're not the only ones that are looking into it and trying to react to it. I'm not so sure about
Special
that.
Districts has put out some information for everyone to get involved and send letters to the legislators.
Yeah, I think any signage is still kind of an imperfect solution from my vantage point. I think that, the focus now is to get the legislature involved. And I think this is a short session coming up, so I don't know how easily that can be added to the agenda. Yeah, it's something we need to at least start to spread the word about.
But not just the park district and this trail committee, I mean, you as individuals, if you could send them to
Anyone in Oregon.
your representatives to say, hey, we want to be able to have these trails open to everyone
Yeah.
without,
Yeah.
If you know anyone, hand them the letter to fill out.
Yeah, and there's I'll have to look it up. Let me make a note. There's a new website that's popped up giving some additional information. I think it's Oregon Recreational Immunity or something. That's got some additional information. But this letter could serve as a template for other folks that want to send it out individually. But I thought it would be powerful for the board to send out a unified letter, much like many other city councils and districts are doing. Send that out to legislature. We cross boundaries here with Dundee and Newburgh, so those city councils should probably be made aware of access to trails and parks may be
I know Dundee
limited.
is.
And the county should be made aware. I'm sure that they probably already are, but so that's my suggested list of contacts, and then the chamber.
Maybe this is something I could ask Kat, but we have a list of folks who are interested about trails and engaging through feedback mechanisms and through maintenance and recreation events. Is there anything stopping us? We have the list. Is there anything stopping us from emailing those folks and just mentioning that this is occurring and that we encourage them to write their elected officials as well? Would that be a misuse of that information? I don't know if you're able to answer that, Casey, but
Can't answer that.
okay. I'll ask Kat. But I think, to your point, anyone can also, in addition to us and the board, writing a letter, they could do it as well, so keep in mind. Any discussion on the letter, the wording of it, or anything like that? The only thing I would say is it might be a cool opportunity to include a statistic about how many folks use the trails in our community to make it a little bit more unique versus others, since we just captured that data, but I also don't feel like we need it if you don't want to put it in there. But it looks good to me.
Maybe you said this, but what's happening with this letter if it is approved? Where's it go? What's happening with it?
The letter would go to the board as part of a recommendation
Yeah, and if they
for
approved
them
it
to send the letter.
to everybody in the district?
Yeah, to.
Oh, just to the legislature?
It's to
To
New-
our
Yeah, I'll read it out.
representative?
Newburgh City Council, Dundee City Council, Yamhill County Board of Commissioners,
Oh.
Senator Brian Boquist, Representative Anna Scharf, Senator Aaron Woods, Representative Courtney Naren, Governor Tina Kotek, and the Chehalem Valley Chamber of Commerce.
So we essentially drafted this letter and are asking them to sign it and send it.
Okay.
Hearing no additional discussion, I will go ahead and move the motion to recommend the CPRD Board of Directors approve and send the CHTAC recreational immunity letter in the packet as written to a list of suggested contacts in the packet as written.
Second that.
There's a second. All in favor indicate saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstaining? Passes unanimously.
I have a question real quick. If you could contact Kat and have them put that on
On
the
letterhead?
agenda as an
Yep.
agenda item, please.
Yes, I will do that.
Thank you, Matt. As the chair, I'm going to. Okay, Matt, you're gonna have to help me out here. Do I need to take tabling this to a vote, the last two items on our agenda, or can I just, as the chair, say that we're gonna table this?
I think you can motion to table. 10 can be very short. I just have one date to add to everyone's calendars.
Okay, then I'm just gonna move the motion to table agenda item 9, cycling trails discussion. Is there a second?
Oh, second.
Here's the second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, that passes. Agenda item 10, Matt.
Yep, I'm looking at trail dates right now. June 1st, Saturday, June 1st is National Trail Day again. I'd like to do something for that. We can discuss where we'd like to do that. And I'd also like to do another one in the first quarter, possibly around March 9th. Don't hold me to the March 9th, but I should have that confirmed here pretty soon. And then my understanding is I can work with Kat to send those dates out. Do I need any additional, asking a question to the board or to the committee, do I need any additional go-ahead to add a date for trail volunteering from your perspective? Quentin?
My inclination's no, because even from a liability standpoint, technically it's all CPRD. We're technically agents to a certain extent. So, CPRD is really the host. So if they're okay with it, then we're acting as their advisory committee to put it on in conjunction with their actual staff. So if CPRD gets it to go, then I don't think you need committee approval.
Okay. Does anyone in the committee disagree with that? I don't want to step on anyone's toes. Okay.
Sounds great.
Just as a volunteer, I'll put
That
some more
sounds
dates
great.
on the calendar. Okay. Thank you.
It'd be great to have one in September, like every, so
There-
March, June, September, something like that.
There's National Public Lands Day in September.
What's the date?
Oh gosh. It's like the third Saturday or something. It's usually
Okay.
the first week of OSU classes, but I don't even know that off the top of my head. So,
Okay.
but maybe you can just add that to your list to consider.
We'll
Okay.
do that.
Matt.
Hmm?
Cool. Anything else for the good of the order?
I just had a quick question. I know they were talking about managing the bathrooms. I know that Stella Olson Park in Sherwood, they ended up putting in some cameras to help manage that park. Is that something that you consider to help relieve the amount of time that you're having to go check the bathrooms? Just something outside, obviously, but just to help manage.
We have cameras on just about every bathroom.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you.
Which is kind of weird
Anything
because we never used to do.
All right. Okay, now you're really throwing me for a loop here. Matt, do I need to vote to adjourn?
No.
Give me all paranoid.
I didn't, yeah.
Just go for it.
Go for it.
Just do
I
it.
move the motion to adjourn today's meeting.
Second,
Second.
All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Unanimously approved.
by the book.
Okay.
T's
All right,
crossed,
everybody.
I's dotted.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
I need my key to start my car.
Thank you.
Yeah.